DesignShop has a lot of tools and features and things that will make creating beautiful embroidery a lot easier. So let's make sure you know where to find them. In beginning to learn our way around DesignShop, let's start at the top. And at the very top, we have the title bar, and that's going to show the level of software. So if I were running in a different level of software, it would show here, but right now I am running in DesignShop Professional. And then beside that, it's got the project that we have open, and this is the first blank project that we happen to have open today, and that is project 1. Below that, we have the menu bar, and the menu bar contains lists of commands and options, and if I click on any of these, you'll notice that I have those commands and options available to me, but to the left, I see an icon on some of them, and to the right, I may see a keyboard shortcut. If I see that keyboard shortcut, that's available for me to use from my keyboard, and if I see an icon, it most likely means that that's available on some toolbar somewhere. These commands are grouped, and file deals with, honestly, mostly just the file stuff. So open, close, save, those kinds of things you can print. Edit deals with undo, redo, cut, copy, paste, and selection. View deals with mostly my zoom level and my view options in my software. Do I see my grid? Do I see my hoop? Those kinds of things. Insert deals with inserting embroidery elements or whole designs. Object deals with manipulating those embroidery elements or objects. Graphics deals with graphics. So my graphic files, do I see them? Do I hide them? Do I make them dim? Do I convert them? The tools menu contains lots of other tools and options for DesignShop. It's also where you'll find a lot of preferences. The windows shows the different windows that you have open, and you can arrange them, cascade them, tile them. Help gives you access to the help manual as well as about DesignShop. And if I click on this, it will bring up about DesignShop. And the thing I want you to see in here is the version number. So when you look at this version number, if you're calling for technical support, they're probably going to want to know that number as well, just to know what you're working with. And so knowing where to find that, again, help and about, you can find out what version of software you're working with, as well as above that, the level that you're working with. Okay, let's look below those to the toolbars. And these toolbars are movable and dockable. So if I click here, I can drag it off. If I close it, I can right click in a blank area to get it back. And I just see that view bar is missing a checkbox. So I'm going to click on that to get it back. And I'm going to drag this back up into place, or I can double click on the title bar to put that back. The first toolbar that I want to look at is the main bar. And that deals mostly with the same things in the file and edit menus, where we've got new, we've got open. I'm going to click on this, so we're going to open a file. And that will bring up the open dialog box. And then I'm going to navigate to a design that's loaded with your software. I'm going to grab Blue J3. And when I do that, you'll get a preview of the design. You'll get information about the design, including the size and the stitch count, so that's handy. I'm going to click on Open. I could have also just double-clicked on the file name, and that would have opened the file. So that opens the file. I can see the file name as the project up here in the project view. I can also see it up here in the title bar. Okay, so that is open. The next one is Insert. A big difference between open and insert. Open opens the files so that you can work on it. Insert inserts the whole project, everything from a file, into the current one that's open. Now, an important thing to think about whenever you do this is whenever you copy and paste, whenever you duplicate, whenever you insert, the X and Y location of every single needle penetration is going to stay exactly the same. So if you had a center design, and then you inserted another center design, it's going to be right on top of it, which is what's about to happen. So let's insert a different design. So I'm going to navigate back up. We did a blue jay last time. Let's do a cardinal this time. I'm going to grab cardinal 3. Again, I select it. When I insert file, very similar, but the box has a different title to it, insert file. And then I'm going to click open. It's going to insert. And like I said, whenever you copy and paste, whenever you insert, those X and Y locations stay exactly the same. So right now I have two birds right on top of each other. I'm going to just drag one to the side. Notice in the project view that it is its own design. That's because we had, there we go. When I hit insert, insert as a new design was checked. If that hadn't been the case, everything would have inserted at the same level. But now I have two designs in my project. Next we have save, and then notes. Notes are pretty fantastic in that I can keep the notes about my design and about the job within the file. I tend to lose paper notes, so I can't lose them this way, and that's really nice for me. Next we have cut, copy, and paste. Remember what I said about those X and Y locations always staying exact. And then we have undo and redo. So I just moved that cardinal. If I hit undo, that cardinal will move back. If I hit redo, it will go back to where it was before. What's really nice about undo and redo in this is that if I click on this arrow, I have a history. So I can drop down to the exact action I want to go back to instead of just hitting undo a bunch of times. Next we have load design. This will load the current project to the machine if MELCO'S is running. Then we have print. Print will bring up the DesignShop printer, and what this does is it prints essentially a run sheet. So if you wanted a piece of paper to reference, you have it. You can see the color sequence, you can see the design, and you can see information about the design. Now you do have more options. You can change, of course, the page setup, including what kind of paper you're using or the orientation. You can choose to see only the unique colors. The unique colors would be the cones of thread on the machine versus the color sequence. And why are these different? Well, I only need one cone of black, but it's being used multiple times. If you want to show a barcode or the notes, you can turn those options on and then it will begin to regenerate. And now if I scroll down, I can see those notes that I took. You can show the design origin. Now this one's a little bit off of origin because I moved that cardinal, remember that. You can show the background. You can have it be actual size. Now this is going to be a little bit interesting in that it will have the preview here that is not actual size, and it says that. And then if I go to the actual size page, it will print at actual size for you. And then you can fill out information about your company so that your contact information is on the page. To print, simply hit print. Next we have help. It does the same thing as pulling up the manual this way. And then we get into the view bar. The view bar contains a lot of your zoom tools, and there is a video on this. But they basically change how you're viewing your design. So I can click and drag a box and zoom way in and see individual stitches, or I can zoom out. I can fit the screen. I've got all of those options available to me here. It's important to remember that as you are changing your zoom level, you're zooming in, you're zooming out, it looks bigger on screen and it looks smaller on screen, but it's not actually changing the size of your design. You're just getting a different view of it. To keep that size in perspective, we also have a ruler. So if I click on this ruler, I can click and drag across an element to see how big that line is. So here I see that I have roughly 2.5 inches or 652 points, and a point for DesignShop's purposes is 1/10 of a millimeter. Next, we have display the currently selected hoop. If I right click on this, I can choose what hoop I want to see from this dropdown. If the hoop isn't in this dropdown, I can customize my hoop list by clicking on customize hoop list, and I can scroll through here and find the hoop that I want, put a check mark by it, hit OK, and then whatever I've added check marks to will show up in this dropdown. So I'm going to choose this square, I'm going to hit apply and OK, and now if I left click on it, I'll see that hoop appear on screen. So right now, as things sit, this little tip of his wing would fall outside that hoop. I need to either change hoops or change how I have these positioned in a hoop. Next, you have the design origin. That just shows 0, 0, X, and Y. Next is the grid. And if I right click on either one of these, you'll get the properties for both. You can change the color, you can change whether it's a line or a dot, you can change the spacing. So right now I have everything set to 1 inch with 8 subdivisions, but you could change that. If I wanted things to be 1/4 of an inch, I could change that to 4. I can hit apply, and now my grid has changed. Hit OK. And I'm just going to click on these to make them go away again. Next over, I have show stitches in 3D. Hide graphic. Show or hide graphic is something that I do typically if I'm digitizing and want to make sure that I got everything. So I have an image up, I'm digitizing over it, and then I hide the graphic, and if suddenly something's missing, it means I didn't get everything into stitches the way that I thought I did, and I still have some digitizing to do. Show or hide stitches. This doesn't do anything right now, but if I select some elements, I can hide those stitches and they will just disappear. It doesn't delete them. If I send it to the machine, they will still sew, but it does hide them. The next one over is show connectors. Now this is going to be a little bit easier to see with the stitches in 3D. I'm going to zoom in here to try to explain what connectors are. So if I look at this element, I have an element here, I have an element here, I have an element here. And in between them, I have no trims. And because of that, I have threads that go between those elements. From the end of this element, which is that little X, to here, and then that's the start, and then the end of that, and then to here. And if I click on this, it will not display connectors. I don't like surprises when I get to the machine, so I leave show connectors on. It's essentially just a non-trimmed thread between two elements, and that's the difference between a connector and a stitch. A connector just goes between elements, and a stitch is within an element. I don't like having things show up on the machine that I didn't know about on screen. So I'm going to turn that back on. Now, if you really wanted to get rid of it, you could add a trim, and that would make it go away. But you want to be careful doing that. You want to make sure that you do have tie stitches if you're adding trims this way. So I'm going to delete that, and let's zoom back out so we can see everybody again. Now the next one over is toggle expanded points. And because I don't have anything selected, it's not going to show me. So I'm going to select, and then I'm going to toggle expanded points. And it's a little hard to see, so let's zoom in. Let's take it out of 3D for this one. And now you can see wherever I have needle penetrations, I have a little bitty plus. That's what toggle expanded points does. If I turn it off, those go away. Not something I do overly often, but it can be handy to see the pattern of a fill. The next two over are your editing modes. So if I have something selected, by default right now, I'm working in wireframe editing mode, but if I click this to expanded editing mode, I can see every single needle penetration, and this time I can move them. So this toggle expanded just shows them. This allows you to edit them. And that means that I'm moving every single needle penetration, and that is not something I do very often at all. It's something that I try to avoid. All right, let me undo. Next we have update auto ties and trims. So if I have automatic ties and trims happening, I can click this to see them automatically update if I've been moving things around. Now, if I save my design, it's going to automatically update anyway. For this next one, center design, I'm going to turn the origin back on so that we can see, and I'm going to zoom out quite a bit so you can see this stuff shift. So right now, this is 0, 0. And if I center design, it's going to move all of my projects so that it is centered over that. And right now, yeah, it looks like the cardinal's closer to center, but if you look at wingtip to wingtip and wingtip to tail on both of these, yep, they are centered now over that origin. This is usually something I will do before I send it over to a machine or before I save a design. There are rare occasions that I will have something off center and I don't want to center the design. But usually if you have something off center, as you can send it over to the machine, you get your hoop just where you want it, you get everything just like you want it, and then you hopefully will trace at the machine and you'll notice this. But if you were to hit go, it's going to show you center and then it's going to move off to wherever else you had it set up in the design. So that's why typically I will center the design before I save it and before I send it to machine, because I don't like surprises. Lastly, we have tools to convert graphics to embroidery. Below all of that, we have the property bar. Now this property bar will show whatever properties are common to whatever elements I have selected or whatever tool I have selected. Now, if you've been following along and you just clicked on a tool, if you're clicking around on screen and it starts scrolling and getting out of control, hit escape on your keyboard and it will delete that element. Now, if you start clicking again, it will do it again. So I can hit escape to get rid of that element, and then I can hit escape again to deselect that tool. So escape is my get out of trouble button. If it's scrolling away and I don't know what I'm doing and I'm getting upset, just hit escape. And if you want out of the tool, hit escape twice. And then to get everything kind of back to where I can see it, I'm going to click on Fit Window. We got a little bit of a preview of it, but the next thing over is the Input Toolbar. And it's divided into kind of 3 chunks. This first top chunk of 8 tools, these are kind of your input tools. Next down, you have kind of your editing tools. So these deal with, top chunk deals with element creation. The middle chunk deals with element editing. And then the third chunk deals with selecting elements, selecting through elements, changing element types, and then using custom shapes. Below that, we have what's called the mini palette toolbar. If you lost track of it and are looking for the name of it, that's it. It's the palette. The big chunk shows you your current color. The little bitty sliver shows you your background color. And you'll notice as I'm hovering over, it's telling me what it is and what it's doing. This chunk here, the next little bit, these are my active colors. These would be, well, I think of them as the spools of thread on my machine. So I've got this black here, but I'm using it in both birds. It shows up in the color sequence 1, 2, 3 times now, but it only needs to be here once. My active colors I treat as my spools of thread on my machine. And then below that, I have kind of a library or pool of colors to choose from. And these are kind of quick selections. If I want to make something green, I'll select it and then come over here and click on green and it's green. It may not be the exact green I want, but it's close enough for right now. If you want to, let me undo and get out of that. If you want to change these colors, you can, of course, right-click on them to bring up the color information and change them. Any of these. On the bottom of the screen, we've got several bars to look at. This first bit deals with the X and Y position of the cursor itself, so as I move, those are changing. Not something I use terribly often, but the next set is, and right now it is blank, but if I were to pick a tool and start digitizing, it will show the length and the angle between the input points. And that is something, let me escape twice to get out of that. That is something that I will use to make sure that I'm not digitizing something that is too small to be embroidered. I'm making sure that it's not less than 10 points, so it's not smaller than the needle that I'm sewing with. Next over, you have zoom again, so I can click on this drop, in this case up, and fit design, fit selection, zoom to 600%. I can go back, fit design, and then you have the scale bar. So here I've got the width and the height, and I can type in here and change it, and it will stay proportional as long as the aspect ratio is pressed in. You've got your stitch count, which you'll see it change if you change the scale, and then to the right of that you've got mirror buttons, so you can flip the design one way or the other, or you've got rotate 90 degrees for something a little bit quicker. And then after that, you've got a slow redraw. If I click this to play, it will sort of play my stitches out on screen as if they were being sewn. And you can do this in 3D. You can also do it with draw to stitch. If I turn on draw to stitch, it will gray everything out and then essentially stitch over it. So you can see where the elements are, but you can also see what's being sewn and in the direction it's being sewn. I will use the slow redraw bar to look at the design and see how the stitches are being played out, how they're pushing, what direction they're pushing, if they're meeting back towards each other. That could be a bit of a problem. Have I stabilized the area? Do I have underlay? I get to see it in sequence to make sure, yeah, that's the order I want it to sew before I send it over to the machine. If I want it to sew faster, I can click on these arrows to increase the speed, or I could decrease the speed going the other direction. But it is a fast way to see how it's going to sew out. On the right side, we have the project view, and this too is movable and dockable, so you could throw this onto another monitor if you needed to, or I can double click to snap it back into place. And the project view has a few different tabs. The first tab is the project tab, and that contains your wireframe elements. It contains your color sequence. It has different levels that you can select at, so I can select a design at a time or the whole project, depending on where I select. And then you have the Stitches tab. The Stitches tab shows me the individual needle penetrations, including the change in X, the change in Y, the length, and the type of stitch. The navigator shows me where the view window is. It's displayed in this red box. If I click and drag this box, it will move the view window around. If I hold Control and click and drag a box, it will act as a zoom. And then new to this version of DesignShop, the design checker can flag what may be a potential problem in the design and help me address it before it ever gets over to the machine. Lastly, I have the view window. That's this big area here, and this is where I do a lot of my work. The view window is where I do the majority of my editing and my digitizing, and that's the reason that I have it take up the largest chunk of my screen. I tend to have the most real estate devoted to where I do the most work. We've looked at a lot of the tools in DesignShop. Now, we haven't covered them all in depth, but most of them have their own videos. They all have their own topics in the manual, so if you need a little more information about them, you know how to find it.